or
We can. I know
who are we
we did get
missing?
an email from John that he might be a few minutes late, depending on how the train was running.
Right?
And Tom Kern, I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything.
Do we have a quorum then?
We do. We do.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready, we can start.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started then.
Okay, Roy, you want to kick it off and then I'll share my screen?
Hold on one second. I think, Arlene, were you going to make some kind of opening statement or you're not?
No, I will real quick.
Okay, yeah. You can go for it first and I'll go next.
Okay, Brian, you ready for us?
Yep, we're good to go.
Okay, great. First of all, a warm welcome to everyone who's joining us tonight from the board, the administrators, the teachers, the students, and any community members. This is, to be honest, my favorite meeting of the year, which tells you a lot about me. But I do enjoy the fact that we take the time to pause and really think and be led by Roy and his team, Mara specifically, about what's going on in K-12 learning, especially this year where everything, it feels like the situation, the environment has led us to the fact that everything can be looked at new. And so I'm really looking forward to this. When we first had to go to remote learning, it was our last board meeting, we were face to face. I remember talking with Mara about how these events could really lead to changes in learning going forward, and that we had a wonderful opportunity to collect data. And you should have seen her smile. She was like, yes, we're going to collect data and we're going to learn from this. So we're going to take this crazy experience and make it into something really cool. So I'm really excited to hear from the team about what their thinking is. And with that, Roy, why don't you kick us off?
Great, thank you, Arlene. Good evening, everybody. It's good to see you all. So this year is a little bit different than in the previous years, because in the past we've been able to do the assessment report and such during this meeting, talk about that, and we did that in an earlier board meeting. And as you know, there's not as much assessment to report on this year as there has been in the past. But it is nice to be able to talk about some initiatives going on and some of the K-12 learnings that we're moving forward on, as opposed to desk shields and 6-foot distancing and masks and all those kind of things. We're kind of getting tired of talking about that. So tonight is really to change that narrative a little bit and talk about some exciting things, we hope, where the district is and where we're planning to move forward on, what we're planning to move forward on as we go. And Mara has been doing just wonderful work leading the group on that initiative, as we all the rest of us worry about the kids and face masks and things like that. She's been tasked with leading the charge on the curriculum side and leadership side and providing leadership for us there. So I'm very pleased to have her and thankful that she's been able to work with us in that way. So Mara, I'm going to turn it over to you. No pressure, of course, but just make it great.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, can everybody see that and hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. So, there's really nothing like a crisis to drive any organization back to its North Star and its mission. And I think, since March, we have really looked very carefully at our commitments in terms of the Bronxville Promise. I think the entire faculty and the administration has been innovative in ways we have never had to before, finding workarounds for everything we wanted to do and needed to do with our children. We continue to do that on a daily basis as we transition to bringing more students back into the building, as well as making sure that our students who are learning at home are getting an equitable experience. So the amount of innovation we have done over the last 6 months, I think, is unparalleled. And we really have skills in those areas we would not have had otherwise. So we are thankful for this opportunity in the sense that we have been able to flex those muscles. In addition, one of the things we've really noticed this year, which is at the heart of the promise, which I will talk about more extensively as we move on, but the social and emotional skills our students need to live through the current realities and also demonstrate resilience and empathy and other skills that we believe are critical to this time as well as their future success. As well as some of the social justice issues that we have come across more recently as a country, and the amount of critical thinking, leadership, and engaged citizenship that will be necessary on behalf of our young people to make sense of it and move forward. So it's really my pleasure tonight to talk about some of our plans for the year that align with the promise in ways I don't think we could have ever really imagined. Our goals are fairly simple and straightforward. We are going to continue to build our practice for teaching and assessment in a hybrid and remote learning environments because of the unpredictability of the year. We always have to be ready to return to remote environments. We are going to talk about the heart of the promise and how it came to be, as well as our emphasis this year on the social and emotional needs of our students. And we are going to continue to build an equitable and inclusive school community through a diverse curriculum and opportunities for both teacher and student reflection, as well as empathy and understanding. Hybrid environments. So we spent a good bit of our summer preparing for this. We actually had this summer 49 teachers, some of them curriculum leaders, others just teachers from the faculty who signed up to really think about what is most important in a hybrid learning environment, meaning teaching some students who are physically present in school, as well as some students who are at home. And we worked with IDE as we have done in the past, and they stress for us these 7 elements of a hybrid environment. So an atmosphere of continual motivation. How do you create that when students are not with you learning every day? A climate of executive functioning, being sure that our students are developing the skills to keep track and maintain their own learning when they are in and out of the building. The structure for data-driven instruction, making sure that we have assessments in place, particularly formative assessments, so we know who is needing our help and when, so we can get to those students at any time, as well as a landscape of opportunities for academically rigorous learning, which includes differentiating for different students under our care. So these 49 teachers over the summer spent a lot of time digging deeply into these 7 elements and learning how to institute them in the classroom. There are more, but I'd like to just focus on 2 models of hybrid instruction that we have been concentrating on, that we worked on building this summer. All of the faculty had PD in these 2 models, and I just want to walk through them briefly so you have an understanding of how we are leading the faculty and using the time. So this is an example of an 80-minute block. This is a high school block. All the categories, of course, would be the same for middle school and even elementary school. They'd likely be closer to 50 minutes or 56 minutes, depending. But basically, you have to get all the students on the screen and in front of you and see who's where. And then you do some direct instruction. You do your teaching for the day. And in this case, you would do it in this model, you would do it with the students in your care in the classroom while streaming to your students at home. And Brad will talk a little bit more about the technology that makes that possible. A big bulk of time is for learning activities and facilitation of learning, where the teacher is really encouraged to work with both learners in the room and learners at home to see who needs additional support and differentiation. A discussion, if you will, and we talked this summer quite a bit about how you could do a discussion with students at home and in school simultaneously using fishbowl strategies, Flipgrid, other technologies that would help us to do that. And then you close the lesson, letting students, kind of sum up what was learned that day and highlighting what would be going on in the next day's instruction. So this is one way, one model that we propose to the faculty in terms of teaching both students at school and at home. One of the things Tom mentioned to me that he finds as a benefit, Tom Wilson, for this model is the predictability of it. So the students at home sort of understand what is going to be happening next, so they can follow along whether they're at school or at home. And it's also a good model to transition back to remote environments should we do that. The students sort of know the flow of the classroom and they can pick up easily because they have a predictable model to follow in terms of how the time is used. This is another example we have used during the hybrid learning environment. This is more of a flipped model. So as you can see, students at home in group 1 might engage with some content and participate in a formative assessment using technology. So for example, they might read a text and record a video response on a Flipgrid as a method of formative assessment for the day's class. The next day, they are likely to come to school and participate in a large-scale Socratic seminar type discussion with their entire class and their classmates. And the teacher would use that discussion to conduct a summative assessment. Discussion questions could be based on the formative assessment that was done as part of the asynchronous class. On the flip side, group 2 is synchronous at school. They may also read the same text and participate in a large-scale Socratic type discussion, which would create the formative assessment for the teacher. Assessing for their understanding. They would have an opportunity to learn from their peers as well as process the information. And then when they go home the next day, they may write a reflection or a literary essay, depending on what it is that encapsulates their learning and would serve as the summative assessment. So this has been helpful, for example, for English classes where discussion is really imperative to the class, as well as health classes where the topics are somewhat sensitive, and having this sort of flipped model creates for a better classroom environment. So these are 2 of the models we've been discussing quite rigorously across the district in terms of how you can do this. And as Brad is going to discuss in a minute, we're constantly crowdsourcing best practices in terms of how to continue to do this better. I just want to say something about assessment. As you know, we ended up this summer with some STAR Renaissance data in reading and math from our students in kindergarten through 8th grade, and that data looked very good in terms of where our students are achieving in both reading and math. But as students have come back into the building, we are going to be giving those assessments again in kindergarten through 8th grade in both reading and math. But we are also having opportunities to assess students in person, which I think makes for better assessment. Thus far, our teachers have done a lot of running records with students, which is where they can actually read with students and ask them comprehension questions. We are noticing that we have in our youngest grades some students who are coming in at lower levels than we have before, but we are confident that now they are back in school, and provided that we stay in school, we can get them up to speed very quickly. But we are constantly monitoring the data. And I would like to say that in terms of our remote classes, for example, we have 1 remote class in the 3rd grade, and the rest of the students are coming into school, but we have 1 section learning entirely at home. As of right now, they are all on pace in terms of curriculum. So we will continue monitoring assessment data in terms of achievement for students who are learning at home and students who are learning in school. That data is going to be coming in, and we're also hoping to get some better data with assessments that can be done in school. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Brad. He's going to talk about the technology that makes all of these hybrid environments I just discussed happen, and some of our newer advances in technology based on our current situation.
Great. Thank you so much.
Brad, before you start, I would just ask the board members if, as we're going through this, if you do have questions or you want to ask something, please. We want it to be a free-flowing conversation as well as a presentation. So please don't be shy about interrupting or putting a question up if you'd like. Thank you.
All right, Mara. So, I have a question. So you said the third grade that's doing their work at home is on pace. Are you measuring that on a monthly basis or weekly, or how are you making sure that they're kind of staying up with their classmates that are showing up at school?
So when I say on pace, I mean in terms of the curriculum delivery. So they are lesson for lesson right now with the teachers that are teaching from in the building. As far as the assessment and their progress, we're going to really start collecting some data on them very shortly and continue to monitor it throughout the year. Some of our early literacy assessments, which we have been able to do, are not as strong as some of the Renaissance learning, but that's to be expected because in this case, they're actually listening to students read. It's much better data. But it's not out of pocket in terms of where we can get them up to speed quickly. And by that, I'm talking about really kindergarten and first grade students. Tricia, if you want to jump in on that, I know we discussed that before.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, I think that once our first graders start getting exposed to more instruction, their reading levels are going to go up. They were on target in kindergarten. I think it's just, a spring and summer, maybe not reading as much as they were before. But about the third grade classes, and with the same situation, fifth grade, where we have full remote classes, and they are on target for pacing of curriculum. We're not going to be able to see, it's a little too early to be able to look at assessments to compare groups of kids right now. We collect assessments, we benchmark kids multiple times a year. Our next time is in November. We might be able to get an idea in November where the classes stand in terms of achievement.
And I don't know what that assessment would tell us, but if it tells us that they're falling behind or they're missing certain curricular things that people are showing, the kids that are showing up, do we kind of have a plan or a thought of how we would catch them up either in the summer or to do things differently at this point? Or are you really waiting to get some measurements at this point?
Well, I guess, the plan would be what we would do in any case where children aren't learning as much as they should be, right? So we would do some sort of intervention. We would switch up our instruction and change our plan. We'd have to look and see where the different weaknesses are to know what that plan would be. So it's hard to tell right now what it would be exactly, but I look at that as just we would any other group of kids who aren't performing where we want them to be performing.
Yeah, I mean, it could come in multiple forms from, making sure that the teacher remotely is able to do more small group targeted work to, let's say, for example, we do a unit on fantasy, which is a great unit that kids love, but if they're learning remotely, we may have to cut a fantasy unit and allow a literary analysis unit to extend a few more weeks so the students get the skills that are most critical. So we really have to wait and see the data, but we have lots of ideas, I think, about how to pivot should we see, some spread in how the students are doing. But as of right now, the pace is on point. I mean, I think at one point we were concerned that they wouldn't be able to cover the curriculum in the same way as those kids learning in school. But that has not been the case thus far. That's also the case, Tom, if you want to chime in sixth grade where there is a full remote section. Tom?
Yes, I just found the unmute button. Every computer is a little different. Sorry. In sixth grade, the paradigm's working very well. It's been a really smooth working year for those teachers. Mr. Vigiani is the point person for that group, and he in particular has found it to be invigorating and rejuvenating and makes him remember the beginning of his career, where he taught as a generalist in a 5th grade classroom. So he's been very excited by this, and the camaraderie and the connection that he has with his students is undeniable. Where we do struggle a little bit is in inculcating those students into the general environment of the school, because they are remote. Some of the cultural and social aspects, I don't think we have a perfect handle on yet, but academically, this has been fantastic. Where that also has difficulty, though, is for short-term absences, when parents want kids to join remotely for a day or two. 6th grade is very difficult because they are actually be joining a class that is not their own. They would be joining work already in progress, parallel, albeit different. And so that's been a little challenging. But in general, our remote students in grade 6 are very excited about school and very happy being with Mr. Vigiani.
The only other thing I would add is it's not uncommon for us to see summer slide, no matter what the situation is. We see it every year.
Sure.
But I think we're just more sensitive to it this year because of everything that is going on. But it is surely not uncommon that every year when we assess in September, in whatever form, you know, we sort of realize that, okay, everybody's got to get back in the game a little bit, and things tend to work themselves out. But I would say we're hypersensitive to that information because we've got, you know, additional factors going on. So we are on that, and we will continue to update you, especially as the data comes in. We're also excited to get back to some of our writing assessments, which was much more difficult to do, you know, during the shutdown.
Thanks.
Given that we're not going to do an assessment until November, it seems like an awfully long time. Is there an assumption that the online students are going to school,
No, so
not as sort of mitigating?
So we do
that. Go ahead.
We do a round of running records, which is where where teachers and students read to teachers, and they are assessed one-on-one in September. We do it again in November. So that would be the second round of assessments for the year. And the Renaissance Star and Math assessments we will be giving by the end of October to K through 8. So in terms of reading assessment, by November, the elementary school is in its second round, not first. We're finishing up the first round right now. We wouldn't wait till November.
Okay, I misunderstood what Trish said then. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Brad.
Okay, great. So up on the screen are 4 different examples of Zoom rooms that were generously funded by the foundation. So these are 4 different takes on a Zoom room. And so these are the 4 pictures that I chose. In the top left-hand corner, you see our high school math teacher, Mr. Halling. And what he's actually doing is he's using a device similar to a Microsoft Surface, and he's sharing his screen, and he has his students from home Zooming in, and he is just mainly doing a screen share. So this type of technology, it's more important that the students see the board. And so that's what he's really focused on. And so that's just one example of how they're kind of leveraging the displays in the room. If we go to the top right-hand corner, that's another room that's computer art. And so that's our art teacher in the high school. And she has a lot of her class is structured around independent work time. She'll have a mini lesson at the beginning, and then students will be working on their art projects. And so she has the main focus, which happens to be a Google Classroom with a essential question up there. And then off to the side is her Zoom TV. There, that 65-inch TV, and she will go and conference with students just like she would move around the room. So you can barely see it, but there's a little camera there that's kind of silhouetted by the window. And she'll kind of go up and interact with the students, checking in with them as everybody's kind of independently working. In the bottom right-hand corner, this is one of our elementary school classrooms that has an existing sharp interactive display. And it's basically a 70-inch TV that has touch capabilities. So this is what it would look like in any of the elementary school classrooms. Usually we have the TVs kind of next to each other, and all of the Zoom TVs are on these articulating arms that extend. And what that gives us the ability to do is put the TV out and almost make a 90-degree angle to the existing board, so that when a teacher is at the board, their first look, either left or right, whichever way they're looking, is at the large TV. And a lot of teachers right now are kind of using it as an extension of their laptop. And their laptop has the Zoom, the Zoom running, if you will. And so it sees the students immediately. So if you could imagine the two TVs on top that show the live Zoom class, just on that TV, and it's the first thing that the teachers are seeing. Obviously, this doesn't work for every single teacher. And one of the things that we've really focused on, much like we did back in March when we first went remote, was really focusing on what teachers do and their pedagogy, and being able to find what makes their teaching special and try and figure out digital tools to replicate that, rather than try and fit everybody into a particular paradigm or learning management system. And so this involves a lot of like one-on-one conversations with teachers, trying to figure out what works for them. And so some people are putting the laptop, connecting it to that Zoom TV and just using it as a larger monitor. And there's other ways that people are kind of utilizing that as well. And then on the bottom right-hand corner, we have yet again another high school Spanish classroom. And this is using the, this is a little bit more clear about how she's using the front projector, which is what you can kind of see the calendar on at the front of the room, and then the students off, just off to the side. And this TV is angled a little bit out, and the students actually see the class as well. And so there is some engagement there. This particular teacher, I won't share her name because I didn't exactly ask for a quote, but she did say that this Zoom TV was exactly what she was looking for as a way to help the students at home feel like they're in the classroom. And so she says that this was a benefit. So with all of this comes a lot of new technology, a lot of questions that teachers are coming up with. So what we've also continued to do is have a lot of office hours. I've been offering office hours every morning. A lot of them are very simple, like Zoom refreshers. And so reminding people of some of the ins and outs and the settings of Zoom, talking about digital whiteboards. So different ways to engage students both at home and in person. This has become very important as a teacher in a physical classroom would want to write something on the board. They'll use something like Google Jamboard, and this will be able to be shared with students at home. And so what that basically means is that they're able to write on the board, and students at home can be looking at this same document, seeing it written in real time, and then be able to hear the teacher's voice. And so some of these tools that have become available to us, we're really focused on in these office hours. And then other engagement tools, something like Pear Deck, where students are able to log in to a presentation. So much like we're watching a presentation right now, Pear Deck makes it an interactive presentation. Students at home and in classroom can log in using a special code. And then what the teacher does is embed some slides inside of the presentation that would involve some sort of activity. So maybe answering a question by typing in text, a multiple choice. Students have the ability to draw, they have the ability to drag, and they have the ability to do a lot of different activities. And this has actually been used K-12, the entire district, because the tool is so versatile that different teachers are finding it different ways. And so again, it's going back to that conversation with teachers about what makes their teaching special and finding technology that supports that rather than force them to use a particular tool that might not work for them particularly. All right.
So, oh, sorry, Brad, quick question for you. Do you plan, or should you even reach out to the students and the families and just kind of gauge their reactions to the last month, especially as it relates to the technology?
We certainly can. I do get a lot of emails, a lot of opinions that people are sharing, and both good and bad. So we're constantly kind of working through this, and conveniently, the next slide kind of talks about some of the crowdsourcing practices that we've been engaged in. So yes, there will be some community reach out. I think that before we really sought a lot of information from the community, we wanted to get teachers comfortable with it before, having too many kind of input, like figure out what really makes teachers special, and then figure out how to tap into the community to really fine tune and say, oh, okay, we can do that a little bit differently, but it's not taking away from the teacher's skill.
Right. I have to be honest, of all the people that have talked to me, only one person has shared any concern about the technology. And that's what was that they really felt like they couldn't see the board that the teacher was writing on, which you addressed. But other than that, I have not heard a lot of negative things, but I would think it would be just nice to have a systematic way to understand what people's feedback is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So one thing that we really want to do is I'm very realistic in that I can talk all day at teachers and the community, and some of it will be understood and some of it won't be. I have a different feel of technology, but what we really wanted to do was make sure that teachers have a voice in this. And so very early on, we kind of started this general Google Doc of crowdsourcing best practices. And so what we tried to do was reach out to teachers that we either saw were doing innovative things in the classroom or heard about, but also really just put it out to the community. And so teachers, these are just 4 paragraphs of a 2 or 3 page long document now of teachers sharing what they found to work in classrooms. And with them being in front of the class, they were able to point out some other things that other teachers found helpful and were able to use in their practice. And this, of course, is through the entire district. So the first one is just kind of talking about how using Zoom flexibly to have a Zoom class going on in 2 different classrooms where you're having one teacher be the expert and another teacher facilitating while that's happening. And so creative ways to be able to use Zoom within the district itself. We've done a lot of work kind of fine tuning our bandwidth and figuring out what we can have, what we can max out with, doing a lot of math around how much bandwidth a regular Zoom call takes. And so what we've been able to do is double our bandwidth so far, and then we're going to continue to expand. And we're under the limit right now, so we're able to Zoom into 2 different classrooms, and we're able to use some of those video conferencing tools within the district, and it doesn't max us out. We upgraded to Zoom Pro late last year, I want to say mid-May. And one of the benefits of Zoom Pro, besides having alternate host and being able to do some of those co-teacher things, is these very quick Zoom polls. And so you might have taken one in other meetings, but it's just a quick multiple choice poll that can be made on the fly or can be made ahead of time. And I really encourage teachers to use this to really interact with students on the fly, because you can't always tell, if somebody's having bandwidth issues at home, they might turn off their camera. But a Zoom poll is a real quick, easy way to find out, yes, they are paying attention and they're with us, and it might just be a technical glitch.
Brad?
Yes, go ahead.
Jack Bearworth, this is kind of a variation on Arlene's question. This is really a long-term issue that I'm throwing out there, and that is, I am stunned by the amount of creativity that's been unleashed. It's extraordinary. What we've got to find out, though, is what's effective. And I mean, there's so many variables, and it'll be a long time before we have real data. But I hope that we will begin to accumulate it so that we can see, because there's a lot of neat things that aren't necessarily producing better results. So I hope we can begin to accumulate that data and sort out what techniques produce the most effectiveness.
Absolutely.
We agree on that for sure.
Yes, I know you do. It just sort of struck me when Brad was talking about all the different innovations.
So Mara and Brad, what's the tension between, is the ultimate game to learn or to keep my attention? You know what I'm saying? You hear a lot from parents that they don't want their kids to spend 6 or 7 hours in front of a computer. And I'm just curious, are you getting any sense, especially since you have 3 classes or 3 groups that are spending 7 hours, are they satisfied with that? Are they content? You know, just help me with understanding how they're reacting to that.
I think they are satisfied with it. You know, I do think that there are aspects of the school day that we cannot replicate through the use of technology entirely. But I think we have done a good job at, you know, trying to make sure the instruction is delivered. We have used the tech tools Brad talks about, you know, from everything from Jamboard to Flipgrid to Pear Deck, so that students can interact from home, as opposed to maybe doing it, you know, more in the classroom in more traditional ways. In my opinion, I think one of the hardest things to replicate in a fully remote environment is the assessment piece, in particular, the formative assessment. You know, just as I'm looking right now at you, it's difficult to tell if you're liking what I'm saying, if you're following me, et cetera, et cetera. You know, so we've tried every trick in the book, from the emojis you can use in Zoom to give a thumbs up, to just get a sense of, are the students at home with us? Do they understand the material we have just reviewed? Have they paid attention? Do they understand? And are they ready to kind of go and work on it by themselves? When you teach with students in the room, you can see that just by being in the room on their faces very easily. And the formative assessment that allows you to do kind of the small group and get to the kids who really need additional support and reteaching if necessary is just much easier to do from within the classroom environment than remotely. So I think that is one area that we try to focus on. And the engagement is connected, because in very many cases, the engagement tells you, okay, they're with me, they get it, they're ready to go.
Yeah.
And if it's just the Zooms without maybe the Pear Deck, the Flipgrid, et cetera, it's harder to know that as a teacher.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I was feeling, was this tension between, you could serve up the education in the most effective, efficient way, but if I'm not engaged, I'm not going to get it. You know,
Right.
I'm not going to do my part. And so thank you for that. That was helpful.
The other thing I would say, and this is really, you know, with great respect for our teachers, the transition from fully remote, as we were throughout the year, from March till the end of the year, to the hybrid was an additional transition. You know, and we kept stressing the idea that you almost have to continue with a remote mindset, because we are going to have kids at home. And we don't want to create inequity between the experiences for the two groups. So we are again transitioning here, and I think we're looking very carefully at what's working. I mean, even those setups, Brad, we were experts in Zoom, and now to Zoom with a group while you have kids at home, you know, in your physical classroom, is another transition that we're making. But I do believe we were prepared. And, you know, we're going to continue to kind of collect data and crowdsource our best practices and see what's really working for our kids.
I just wanted to note that students in masks behind shields separated by 6 feet through the room is also not what we're used to. So in person is not the same.
That's a good point.
As what it used to be. And so even gauging student understanding and engagement when students have masks on and are sitting behind shields is very different for our teachers than how things were prior to March, which is important to understand.
Yeah.
There's a lot of adjusting taking place, and it's not just with kids at home versus in the room, it's also kids in the room.
Yeah. And it's interesting you should say that, because I was actually thinking it would be easier to gauge somebody's attentiveness on a Zoom, because you could see my face, because with the mask, you just get my eyes. It's tough. I get it.
Yeah, there's no opportunity for that sort of, you know, kind of thing. All right. So this is actually some data. Anne, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Sure, this was this is a Google Jamboard, and the SFL, I did not prompt this, but the SFL prior to last week's meeting just put out there, let's gather some information about, this is specifically the high school, what's going well in the high school. And then the next slide is areas for improvement. So I guess what I would just say is, this is one form of feedback that students are providing to us, and it contains quite a bit of useful information about their experience.
Yeah, there are a lot of comments here about the engagement being much better than when it was all online. The keeping social distance while learning, good amount of good feedback on engagement here. Kids do like, I think, being in school, but teachers have really made a big effort to make the kids who are learning from home from that class feel a part of, and that was our main goal. I would add that the SFL wrote the teaching staff a thank you letter about how well the hybrid is going. I thought that was very great. And I actually took the slide about, kind of areas for improvement off, because the biggest area for improvement was an extended lunch, because I guess the kids are having difficulty eating and getting home for afternoon classes within the 50 minutes. So that is some data in itself, but I think that the teachers are working really hard to make the hybrid learning environments work well and being equitable with both groups of students and making them feel engaged and ensuring that they're learning, and if they need support, that they get it.
I think at the high school, also, since just today we transitioned to 2/3 of the students in the building, where 2 out of 6 days students will be in all day, we're going to have to reassess, because that is going to change both the dynamic of the Zoom students versus those in the room, because those at home will be a smaller group, and also the sense of what is it like to be in school full day, 2 days out of the week. So some of the information we'll have to regather after a little bit of time in this new model, because I think it'll be more relevant if we give this a little bit of time to be in place.
Okay, so before I transition into social and emotional learning, I think it's important to share that we, worked very hard this summer in terms of PD offerings to be as prepared as possible. I believe we are going to continue to learn a lot about best practices in both remote and hybrid environments. We're actually continually experimenting. We have some elementary teachers teaching physically across 2 rooms. And we've experimented with streaming the 8 to 10 minute mini lesson, and then having the teacher literally move from the 2 rooms to focus more on the formative assessment to get to the students who really need the reteaching. So we're continually thinking about how to get better at it, and we will monitor the assessment data, as we said, for all those important reasons. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about something that we're calling the heart of the promise. Actually in September of 2019, the curriculum leaders, we actually had a tri-states visit, and as part of that, the curriculum leaders, as well as other faculty, a large group of faculty and administration across the Bronxville School, really looked at the 4 dispositions of the promise, and after years of work on it, tried to sort of condense it and pick out what is most important at this point. And we found that there were several skills that were necessary for all 4 of the dispositions: critical thinking, leadership, engaged citizenship, and innovation. And they were things like resilience and empathy and reflection and collaborative skills. So we took them sort of out of the 4 quadrants, if you will, and put them at the center. And we are now referring to it as what is at the heart of the promise. In January of 2020, we actually were able to pull a large group of teachers and parents together to look at those skills that we pulled into the center that rode all 4 dispositions and ask them, what else do we need to be thinking about in terms of the social and emotional skills of our students? And actually, one of the very last days in March when we were in school, Bill Meyer, myself, and David Russert, who is the high school health teacher, put that list in front of a group of high school students and said, what do you think of this list in terms of social and emotional skills, and what is missing? And interestingly, I'll talk a little bit about what they thought was missing, which was actual study skills. So a big goal of ours this year is to really focus on the social and emotional skills that we provide our students, the instruction that we provide for them to develop those skills, and particularly at this time, them developing those qualities is a clear priority for us this year and moving forward. So I'm actually going to ask Erin Kine to talk a little bit about how we got here, as well as what we're going to be doing.
Thanks, Ma. Yeah, so we actually presented this slide along with a few others. I think it was just last week at the school-wide PTA. And in hindsight, as Mara mentioned, you know, a lot of this work, there's been like an undercurrent of a lot of the work you're about to see that was done over the summer. And it wasn't by any means in response to the pandemic. It's really just been in response to the sort of day-to-day anecdotal and observational experiences we have as faculty members and administrators and teachers and parents and students. And so, not to take you back to 2017 when life was a little bit easier, but just to ground everything, you know, we partnered with Challenge Success in the 2016-2017 school year, and for the first time that I'm aware of, at least at the high school in Bronxville, we had some of the data that we sort of anecdotally experienced as we came together as faculty members in terms of students exhibiting, you know, manifesting some of the stress in sort of physical symptoms or by absences and things of that nature. So this was, I was actually just looking, the students that took this survey were at the time, our seniors were 8th graders, and so the juniors would be 7th graders. And so we have, you know, again, these data points to speak to that, whether it be classes or athletics or internal pressure or external pressure, like our students are feeling the squeeze of going to high school and for that matter, middle school as well. And so we sort of set out, as you all know, on this path to partner with Challenge Success to figure out where we can kind of sort of, I would say like round some of our edges throughout the high school to make, you know, their experience that much better. And simultaneously, Rachel Kelly, and I think the psychologist at the time discovered that there is this DBT work being introduced into high school. So the foundation was instrumental in bringing in some of the leaders of that movement and teaching the counselors and the psychologists at the time specifically how to implement these DBT strategies in a school-based system. And as you can see from the slide, DBT was chosen by leaders in that field specifically because of the principal actionable skills that it like enforces for the students. And so these two things were kind of happening parallel, and I think it really just kind of brought us to where we are today, which I think I'll let Mara sort of piggyback on.
Sure. Okay, so there is a lot on this slide. I don't really expect you to read it all, but we basically looked at all of the skills in the heart of the promise, and as well as some of the things that our students told us to pay particular attention to, as well as align the DBT skills to really look at these kind of 5 pillars, if you will: mindfulness, interpersonal effectiveness, emotional regulation, dealing with distress, as well as study skills, and thought about how will we grow these skills K through 12. So this summer we met extensively, also generously, the summer work was generously funded by the foundation to really map out how these would look in our kindergarten through high school programs. And as most of you are well aware, the elementary school currently has the ES Care program. The lessons are delivered by Dr. Joyce Fastola and Dr. Manu Thomas, as well as others. We are incorporating this work this year into the middle school advisory program. And then for our high school, we are actually incorporating these skills into freshman transition. You know, last year, we were sort of hedging maybe towards an advisory program in the high school. Now doesn't seem the best time to start anything like that. But we are actually learning some lessons from this experience into how to provide asynchronous instruction in these areas and allow our freshman transition to be the opportunity for students to describe how they might be using these skills as they transition to high school. So without going through all of this, as you can see, the study skills, organization, importance of sleeping and eating, how to study, how to take notes, how to find your passion, is something we will be developing curriculum against in the middle school advisory and high school freshman transition. Interpersonal effectiveness, just to give you an idea of how that grows. You know, in kindergarten, they talk about friendships, respect, and empathy. It moves up to improving relationships, communication, resolving conflict. In middle school, how do you be your authentic self with your peers? How do you communicate? And how do you create a community of equity and inclusion? Up through high school, authenticity, being yourself in your community, communicating with others with different viewpoints, also creating a community of equity and inclusion, and then moving forward to advocacy. So you can see there how the interpersonal affective skills grow K to 12. It was really a pleasure to spend a lot of time this summer thinking about how these skills would grow. They are actually stated in the form of essential questions, which is a common way of, you know, kind of mapping curriculum and developing scope and sequence. They are not stated in that form here, just for conciseness, but we had a lot of talk about how this would look and how it would grow. And we are now busy developing curriculum, especially in the middle and high school, to match this. So I'm actually going to show you two examples, and I want to stress here that we are utilizing asynchronous activities. So for example, this is a give skill, which is a skill you would use if you want to maintain your friendship, but you're dealing with some conflict. For example, like everybody wants to go see a different movie, and how you validate someone's thinking, but try to move towards compromise. The students would actually watch this video, which was created by school psychologists and counselors in an asynchronous way. They would come into their advisory, in which we have created lesson plans for advisors, and talk through what the skill means and do a lot of reflection on where they might use the skill, and then moving forward, how they use the skill effectively. So I'm just going to show you a little bit, just so you can get a sense of what it is. Here they're talking about
I understand how you feel, and I realize this is hard. I see you are busy, and that must have felt.
E is for use an easy manner. Be mindful of your attitude. Smile. Use non-threatening body language. Use a pleasant tone of voice. Be mindful of personal space.
Okay, so the benefit of delivering the lesson that way is students can go back and review it at any time. If they're having a particular challenge or they're working with a counselor and they want to review that skill, it's there for them to do so. This is another one from our freshman transition. I'm going to actually show you one on the study skills we talked about.
If where you work is important, when you work is just as important. There's an expression called eating the frog. It's a strange expression, but I think it really captures how you can prioritize certain tasks over other ones. Often when we sit down to work, we might get in the habit of searching social media or checking scores online. But you really want to create a process by which when you sit down to work, you take on the most difficult task first. Often in school, that might be studying for a test, or writing a paper, or writing up a lab report. But you save the mindless ones for the end of the year, the most challenging.
Did we lose Mara?
Find is it builds momentum for.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So that was the incomparable Bill Meyer, who definitely has a career of voiceover should he need it. But as you can see there, he is developing. Were you able to see that? Hear that? He is developing asynchronous lessons for students to work through in terms of study skills, as well as social and emotional learning. So all in all, we are really, we have this curriculum really well mapped out. And this year we're going to spend writing as much curriculum as we can and getting it incorporated into middle school advisory, as well as the freshman transition program. Aaron, do you want to add anything on freshman transition at this point?
No, not necessarily about freshman transition. I mean, well, I will say that the program's been long-standing, and we felt like it was a great entry point to kind of cast the widest net in terms of delivering the curriculum. And so, the seniors this year, we were been able to kind of pair them up versus have them in bigger groups of a dozen or so students with the ninth graders. And we're sort of working towards building bigger pods. But we're continuing in the high school to look for other entry points to share the pretty amazing work that Tom and Bill did over the summer with some of this with this curriculum. So that too is evolving as time goes on for the rest of the high school students that aren't senior leaders or in the ninth grade class.
Yeah, and the videos sort of supplement the group discussions about where and when to use these skills and how effective they are. The elementary school who completed a year of curriculum got a lot of feedback and then revised it. So we plan on getting feedback as well from our middle school and high school students on what we're planning to do this year, and then revising the curriculum based on that feedback as well.
So Mara, this is a challenging question for me to ask you, but a lot of what I've seen in the last 10 minutes is really founded in this new wave of thinking around vulnerability, and which I personally think is fabulous and long overdue. How do you get comfortable that those who are delivering the instruction also believe in vulnerability?
I think that's a really great question. I know, for example, in the middle with the middle school advisors, we talked a lot about how to roll the DBT work forward. And one of the things that they asked, middle school advisors asked was, we don't feel we can teach the skills, but we are comfortable asking kids to reflect on how they use the skills. Hearing those stories and creating space in our advisory for the sharing of those stories and where the skills have been most useful. As far as the students, really being vulnerable, one of the things that we're hoping to institute is this idea of journaling through the use of these skills. We have certain kids who are more than happy to be vulnerable with their classmates. We have certain students who are not, for obvious reasons. But the journal always being the place that you can really write about something that was challenging for you and how maybe one of the skills had helped you, or also consider, a challenging situation where you didn't use the skill. And if you had to go back and do it again, what might you do differently? A lot of the lessons also ask teachers who are comfortable to share their own experiences, particularly as it relates to past mistakes they may have made as a middle school student, for example, to sort of model the kind of vulnerability that you're talking about. So it's not easy to do, but through these lessons, we're trying to create a space in which we can do that.
I would like to add to that, Mara, if I could, that it would be important to remember that it's not just vulnerability, it's the belief in growth mindset that sets the teachers apart that take on advisory. They have to see their students and themselves as perennial learners, and that the people they are today is not who they are. It's who they are today. And they are working toward evolving, growing, changing, moving toward a future themselves. And that's a lifelong process if you do it well. And our teachers do embody that ethic and that belief that students don't come to them fully formed, and the work that they do with our students is in its purest essence a proving ground for trying on new ideas, trying on different parts of the world, and seeing how they fit. And that's why we read literature. That's why we discuss characters. That's why we analyze history. It's all connected to putting on new ideas, seeing how they fit, and moving forward with an enhanced view of ourselves. And that's an important part of the advisory experience.
Thank you.
So the overall goal here, just before we move on, is to eventually curate all these resources for the parents as well. So they will be aware of the skills taught, can learn more about how to use them, and talk to their students at home about using give skills instead of rolling your eyes, potentially, which might be familiar if you have a middle school child at home like I do. But ultimately, we want to develop some really nice resources to also be shared with the community so they can be aware of what's going on and support their child's social and emotional learning at home. Okay. So for our last piece tonight, we are going to talk a bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion and our efforts in that area. We have done quite an extensive amount of work in this area. We are continuing to move forward. I've just highlighted for you on the left, these are hyperlinks. I'm sure at some point you'll get this and you can reference these. But there are New York State social and emotional learning standards. There's a culturally responsive sustaining education framework, dignity for all, state social studies standards, as well as laws that suggest we need to make sure we create a inclusive community as well as teach students in terms of offering diverse curriculum and historical perspectives, so on and so forth. They are very embedded in many New York State frameworks. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Tricia and Rakia to talk a little bit about the DEI work that has been going on in the elementary school for quite some time.
Thanks, Mara. So our work began as a diversity, equity, and inclusion think tank about 4 years ago. And that grew out of some scenarios that were coming up in classrooms, just questions that kids were asking and teachers didn't quite know what to say. Questions around race, ethnicity, equity. And so it kind of sparked a larger conversation with the faculty about like, we need to be able to feel comfortable to take on this topic for our students. So this was a voluntary kind of think tank. We had 20 faculty members on it, and it just kind of really started all of our work. So the first project that we took on was our diversity book club books. This was a foundation grant a few years ago where we have certain picture books that every grade level reads, and they're connected to social justice standards, and they have whole class conversations really that connect to identity and empathy. And then our more recent work is we read a book called Being the Change by Sarah Ahmed. And these are specific lessons around diversity. For our younger students, it focuses on diversity, empathy, and identity, and all the way up to our younger students that explore topics like bias and microaggressions. We also had the pleasure of working with a consultant last year. His name is Paul Gorski. He's very well known with his organization called Ed Change. And we wanted to bring him in because we wanted to be able to create a vision for our team. And so he helped us create the vision that you see there. That's really about understanding what equity means for ourselves so we can then instill it in our students. And he also helped us come up with an approach to look at our curriculum. It's called the 4 Approaches to Diversity. And it's just so you can see how curriculum can range from an appreciation of diversity all the way up to really being transformative and focusing on equity. Rakia, is there anything you want to add?
No, I think you pretty much hit it on the spot. I think Paul Gorski really took our work to the next level. I think it started off as an idea and a group of interested teachers, and then he kind of like solidified it for us and gave us some more like research-based grounded work that's really guiding our practices today. So, yep.
We have also established a 6 through 12 DEI committee, which actually just met for the first time last week. We had over 25 participants to include a few adults from the community, many interested faculty, and some students who participate in the DEI committee. That will be key as we move this work forward in middle and high school. Because it is such a large group, we are probably going to break it down into subcommittees. But as part of our first meeting, we really shared what draws us to the work and what are some things as a school community we hope to get better at through the work. So one of the things was to continually revise the curriculum, which we have been doing and will continue to do both with new courses and existing ones. Some of the students expressed the idea of making sure that when we teach, we connect the past to the present, so the past can be a lens for understanding what is going on in current events and our current reality. Continue to make efforts to establish an inclusive school community. Some of the students shared really wonderful stories of students welcoming in new students. There were also some stories about joke culture that they're hoping we can do something about and just kind of understanding where the lines are in terms of jokes and microaggressions, supporting the faculty in fostering civil discourse. This is a key component here. How we can have differing opinions, but how do we foster a civil discourse to at least come away with understanding what other people's perspectives are, potentially through their lived history, and how do we take that into our own ways of knowing and moving forward. Developing a language and vocabulary for discussion around issues of race, gender, and class, recognizing how we create a language so students feel safe in discussing things they want to discuss, and also feel safe in expressing sincere and genuine curiosity about someone else's culture without it coming off as a microaggression or offensive. So there was work to do around there, as well as how will we engage the broader community, meaning parents and teachers who are not part of the committee. So we are very excited about that. In our next meeting, we are hoping to create goals around these themes and break into subcommittees to start to get to work at them. In addition to that, we do have some plans for this year that are already put in place and have begun. The elementary school will continue their work around, as Tricia mentioned, the diversity book club and the social justice lessons from Be the Change. We are actually doing an audit of diversity of authors and themes in ELA in grades 6 through 12. And Kate Roberts, our middle and high school literacy consultant, is going to help us look at those lists to assure that we have balance. We have formed a partnership. Bill Meyer has been exceptional in his role as service learning coordinator in creating a partnership with Sarah Lawrence College, along with the school districts of Mount Vernon and Yonkers. Sarah Lawrence will be hosting a speaker series, which is open to the entire community on equity and education. The first session is November 14th at 7 p.m. That will be PR'd for everyone to know about and attend, of course, over Zoom. One of the benefits of being in this situation is we can get a lot of attendees. The panel will consist of experts in this area, and students from all classes in high school will have the opportunity to attend. 5 students in Bronxville from the SGLI group and service learning, 5 students from Yonkers, 5 students from Mount Vernon, 5 Sarah Lawrence College students will collaboratively work with Mellon Fellows to engage in a social action project based on the content of the speaker series. So while the speaker series will be available for everyone, a few of our students are going to collaborate with Mount Vernon and Yonkers school district students, as well as Sarah Lawrence College students, to move their learning into action, which could come in the form of raising more awareness, etc. As I think we had mentioned before, our book studies are being offered through the Teacher Center that focus on historical context, racial identities, and culturally relevant pedagogies. We are thinking about looking for speakers for the faculty on the lived experiences of others and support for parents in talking about race at home, as well as this week I launched a 4-week discussion on how we can foster civil discourse in the classroom as a pilot, and we'll see how that goes to see if we can use some of those materials for the full faculties, as this is a particularly important issue right now, and making sure that our teachers have the facilitation skills to create civil discourse in the classrooms around controversial topics. So we're very excited about all this work. It is intense, but we are happy to roll up our sleeves and get involved. And the faculty and students are very excited to be engaged in building what this will look like going forward. And that's all I have.
Just a few things, Mara. No, really, it is amazing. Is questions, comments from board members?
Well done. A lot of work went into that, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would echo that. That was excellent. And also the amount of work that has gone into the hybrid learning model is, I know it's more than any of us will ever know. And it's so appreciated by the whole community. So thank you guys so much.
Yeah, I would just echo, just say the willingness to continue to make things better and improve all the time. You guys are doing a great job. Hopefully we'll continue to head in that direction for the rest of the year.
Great.
Thank you. Arlene, maybe I can ask Brian or Brad if they're watching on YouTube, if there are any questions
Oh, great.
from any of the community members.
There are no questions on YouTube.
Okay, thank you.
Great. With that,
If there's anything else.
can we say thank you very, very much? And we are standing right beside you, Mara, not behind you. And we'll even take a bullet for you.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thanks,
It's a
Mara. Well done.
pleasure.
Yeah. So thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Bye.